They conquer killer Arctic storms and carve roads through the ice-bound Northwest Territories of Canada. They willingly drive their massive big rigs across giant frozen lakes over a fragile layer of ice that could shatter without warning, dumping them into the icy depths. These men are the special forces of freighting, willing to take on trucking's most dangerous route. Now, Ice Road Truckers on Modern Marvels.
The Arctic is perhaps the deadliest place on Earth. When the brutal winter grips this stunning wilderness and temperatures plummet to a lethal minus 50 degrees, everything freezes, including the countless lakes, great and small, that are everywhere in the north. It is over these lakes that a top-notch group of truckers go to work. Carving roads where none had existed before, these drivers maneuver their massive machinery over a precarious layer of ice so they can transport freight to the remotest communities in Canada's Northwest Territories.
It looks like a frozen lake, it acts like a frozen lake, but it's what's underneath that frozen lake that's the unknown quantity. And that's all part and parcel of the challenge, is make sure that you get it right, because I for one don't want to go swimming.
I had a guy with me here a week ago. He worked here about 3 days. He said that's enough of this. He didn't like it. He didn't like the cracking of the ice. That bothered him.
They drove with one hand on the door latch so they could jump if they had to. And that really tells the story.
For anybody that's actually working in this business and traveling on the ice, there really isn't a question of if you're going to fall in, it's when you're going to fall in.
It is March. Spring has arrived and the ice is quickly thawing. This convoy could be the last of the 9-week ice trucking season. Soon the ice will no longer be able to sustain the weight of these gargantuan rigs. It could shatter at any time. If they crashed through the ice, they could sink hundreds of feet to the bottom of a freshwater lake and have only seconds to surface before they freeze to death. These men are driving and racing against time. Despite the risks, it's a route that has lured drivers for decades. It's an elite few that are daring yet cautious and have been able to conquer this, the Everest of all trucking routes.
No place for kids or cowboys. That's one way of summing it up.
This spectacular and majestic wilderness has beguiled and seduced adventurers for centuries. European explorers came first. They were determined to find a quick trade route to the riches of the Orient through the legendary Northwest Passage. The most tragic expedition was that of Sir John Franklin. This 47-year veteran of the British Royal Navy had spent years surveying and mapping the Arctic. In 1845, he set sail from England on his noble quest to find the passage. He and his crew tried to bust through by ship, but got locked in the Arctic ice. Franklin then ordered his men to march across the ice on foot. However, they were hopelessly ill-prepared and sealed their own fate when they decided to bring along thousands of pounds of useless supplies.
2 ships, steam engines, a library of 2,000 books, tinned foods, 129 men. They were overwhelmed by the environment.
Their fine woolen clothing was saturated with their own sweat and turned into virtual shrouds of ice. Their fate was eerily marked by a trail of bits and bones.
One of the great lessons of the North is that if you're unprepared, you're going to die. Gore-Tex, great hiking boots, modern equipment means nothing. You get wet, you get cold, you get frostbite or hypothermia. It's a land that still catches the unprepared and takes them.
Undaunted by the story of Franklin and the many other explorers who met similar fates, prospectors continued to come north, lured by the promise of riches. They charted and surveyed this largely unknown territory, noting great deposits of gold, silver, and copper. But those who survived had to learn how to adapt to this savage land. They learned valuable lessons from the Native Americans and the Inuit, the tribes of the high Arctic.
You're living on such a very narrow survival base. At that time, people were still living that way, and they had made their adjustments with nature that were just amazing.
The native knew that it was futile to fight Mother Nature and showed how to live with the environment by using it. Most critical to sustaining life was their transportation system. If they could travel, they could hunt and gather food. Therefore, they could survive. The kayak proved to be the fastest and most efficient way across water. Made from walrus skin, this aquatic SUV had room for the whole family. But the mainstay of transport was the sled. Horsepower didn't come from combustion engines, but from canine power. With their sleds, natives forged the very first ice roads. These powerful dog sleds allowed the nomadic peoples to haul heavy loads over long distances and remained effective well into modern times. Dog sleds worked well for these people with few possessions, but they had limitations. Dogs only had the strength to pull a few hundred pounds, not thousands of pounds. Early European settlers adopted the dog sled and used it for travel throughout the North until the arrival of aircraft in the late 1920s. Known for its lightweight and agility, the bush plane quickly became the principal means of transporting goods and people in this frozen tundra. In 1930, a deposit of uranium that later supplied the atomic bomb was discovered near the Arctic Circle, and the northern mining industry was born. The mine was named Fort Radium and was located on the west side of Great Bear Lake, one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. Gold was discovered in 1934 near the small commercial settlement of Yellowknife, deep in Canada's remote Northwest Territories. A frenzy of pioneer prospectors, bush pilots, and adventurers flocked to Yellowknife, and its population exploded. As mining camps appeared throughout the Arctic, Yellowknife became a vital hub for miners. With a growing demand to establish mines, a means of transportation had to be found. It had to be both cost-effective and powerful enough to bring in massive mining equipment and haul out the priceless ore. But with these new methods came deadly obstacles.
Although the dog team has been replaced by the snowmobile, there is a revival of dog teams using Eskimo dogs, or kingmik, in many northern communities. Ice Road Truckers will return in a moment. You're watching Ice Road Truckers on Modern Marvels.
Yellowknife, capital of Canada's Northwest Territories, is the gateway to the ridges of the high Arctic. With a population of 17,000, it's the biggest town, isolated in a region half the size of the United States. Yellowknife began in the 1930s as a small mining camp built above a sizable gold deposit. Prospectors and adventurers flocked here. New settlers were determined to find their Arctic El Dorado. But before they could turn their attention to pulling riches from their frozen earth, they had to learn simply how to survive this glacial no man's land. Because of the scarcity of food and supplies, much less mining equipment, a reliable link to the outside world was essential. Bush pilots willing to take their light planes into this remote region proved critical to the expanding mining industry. However, they were too costly to fuel, had limited cargo capacity, and had a difficult time flying through the Arctic storms. If mines and isolated villages were to survive, a more reliable and cost-effective mode of transportation had to be found. The only roads to Yellowknife were haphazard sled trails. By the 1940s, bulldozers were being used to bust through the bush and plow more permanent paths. Tractors could drag literally tons of supplies and far surpass the capacity of a dog sled or a bush plane. But cat trains, or cats, nicknamed after the Caterpillar brand tractor, were painfully slow. So drivers looked for any way to shave countless hours off their arduous journeys. They willingly risked their lives by cutting across frozen lakes. But cat trains had two critical flaws. They traveled at a top speed of 5 miles per hour. They were too slow for the brief hauling season and were too heavy for the ice to support. The search for safer and faster transportation began. A Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer by the name of John Dennison was stationed in Yellowknife. From his old days of doing construction work, he understood the perils of the terrain and seized upon an opportunity.
I learned that anywhere you can take a cat, I can take a truck. Over hill, over dale, through muskags, everything else.
Yellowknife was 800 miles from the nearest city, a 10-day trip up the Hay River in summer. If goods could be trucked, Yellowknife would greatly benefit. Looking for a new line of work, Denison and his younger brother Harry bought a rugged old Marmon Harrington Army truck in 1947. Denison found the need for supplies was so desperate that he hauled non-stop. In summer, he hauled goods hundreds of miles through the bog, or muskeg, the wet, spongy ground. And in winter, he traveled over the frozen tundra. Others experienced great difficulty maneuvering their vehicles through the perilous terrain.
No, there was no road. They'd only run a cat road through, and they couldn't get through in the summer because it was too muskeggy. But we had the four-wheel drive, and we managed to bust our way through. That's how we really got started in the freight business.
Knowing the dangers, but needing to work efficiently, he had to use the myriad of lakes that dot the tundra because this was the shortest way to a destination. But the lakes could only be driven in winter when they were frozen. The smooth and unobstructed drive was much easier than breaking bush. Denison found himself committed to revolutionizing land transportation in the Northwest Territories. Wanting to prove his point, Denison accepted a job that others considered foolhardy. He signed on to deliver a 6-ton generator to a gold mine in Yellowknife. The only way to get it there was by crossing one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. So he embarked on a harrowing journey and became the first man to drive such a heavy truck across the 150-mile-long Great Slave Lake.
We were 10 days out on Great Slave Lake, and we didn't have any antifreeze. No windows on one side, this whole truck. But I had a case of eggs there and some loaves of bread. So when somebody needed, I'd take them. All I have is a blowtorch, and you take the blowtorch and blow the shells off the eggs and put them in the frying pan. And, really good stuff.
They were totally isolated from the rest of humanity, enduring numbing temperatures and a wind chill of 80 below zero. But despite the hardships, he and his men succeeded in delivering the generator. With this success, Denison quickly gained valuable experience and notoriety. For the next 15 years, Denison hauled countless tons of desperately needed goods from far-reaching British Columbia and Alberta up to the Northwest Territories.
A lot of people say you can't do it. That's what they said I'm doing. And I always said, if you can't do it, I don't know, I can't do it till I tried.
What my dad maybe is the old family motto, perseverando, which means perseverance and doing something that somebody said you couldn't do.
To do what he did, you have to be assessed. You have to be single-minded, and you have to be directed towards one goal. And he certainly was. Nothing impinged on that.
Denison and his men tested the limits of human fortitude. Risking their lives, they paved passages where none had been before. He was now prepared for an even greater and more dangerous challenge.
The Great Slave Lake, named after the slave Indians, is the 5th largest lake in North America, with an area of 11,031 square miles. Modern Marvels will continue in a moment. You're watching Ice Road Truckers on Modern Marvels.
The birth, life, and death of a northern mine depends upon the costs of supplying it. Everything must be moved. Food, lumber, fuel, mining machinery, even whole houses. Trucking this freight is about 1/3 the cost of flying it in by cargo plane. Over a decade of trucking, John Denison, the bold Mountie-turned-trucker, learned through trial and error how to actually build an ice road by using methods to thicken the ice to give it added strength. In addition, he perfected the building of portages, the earthen ramps that are the transitions from the lakes to the land. These are the critical links for safe and speedy truck transport.
John Denison actually had the idea that we must speed this up. So he was the fellow that really did get the winter ice road via truck. And what his idea was to be able to transport these trucks over the portages and be able to clear the ice off to travel with wheeled equipment across the ice and speed up the mode of transportation.
In 1962, Denison booked his most significant and risky hauling job. 3 2-ton generators needed to be retrieved from the Port Radium mine, and Denison was willing to accept the challenge. This meant going to the mine site in the barren lands at the Arctic Circle, and then hauling the generators 450 miles south to Hay River. This route, 90% over water, had not ever been attempted by cat train. But with typical unshakable will, Denison paved the longest ice road ever. His road-busting method, still used today, was simple and effective. To break the trail, he deployed the small and speedy Bombardier, or Bug. Then a V-shaped snowplow widened the path. Denison and his men formed a convoy and inched their way up to Port Radio. The going was slow and harsh.
400 miles from anywhere. Not very pleasant. Damn cold. But I don't know, that didn't seem to bother us that much. We all managed to have some kind of shelter.
Even slight changes in temperature would snap the solid steel of their trucks, often disabling them.
Temperature didn't matter. 40 below zero was nice going. 50 below was getting cold. 60 below, damn cold. And so if you hit something, a rock or something with it like that, the matter would break.
Critical to his success and survival was his ability to improvise and find solutions to mechanical breakdowns.
You're isolated from any help for the immediate emergency, and so you have to be able to take your engine apart and find out what's wrong and put it back together again and carry parts for the obvious breakdowns.
Denison also had a keen understanding of the subtle yet important differences in the ice.
There's good ice and there's bad ice, there's clear ice and there's snowy ice. And you just got to kind of get the feeling for it. I can go on 4 inches ice and not have in trouble. I can go on 18 inches ice and have trouble.
He managed to forge 800 miles of road that winter, successfully delivering the generators and 400 tons of other goods. Without the commitment of Denison and his crew, another mine would have perished. In 1968, author and adventure journalist Edith Iglauer, initially lured north on the trail of the Inuit people, met John Denison in Yellowknife. Iglauer became the first civilian to ride the ice roads. The sound of the ice cracking under their truck made a deep and lasting impression.
When the ice does the cracking, the noise is pretty terrifying. Anytime when I was scared, it was at the sound of the ice cracking.
At their peak, Denison and his ice road rangers carved a network of over 1,000 miles of winter roads in a single year. During his career, he clocked tens of thousands of ice road miles and hauled countless tons of vital equipment. His bold and driven nature led him to willingly risk his own life, but he never compromised the safety of his men.
John would never have pushed into places where the danger was weighted in the wrong direction, although it seemed as if he did.
A lot of the methods they used then were virtually experimental. What they used to do was, of course, travel across these various lakes, and they could tell if the loads were a little too heavy because they started to get into trouble. So what they virtually judged is staying just inside of that envelope of trouble all the time.
He was a leader of men. That's what a leader has to be able to do, is to keep an eye on everything and make sure that mistakes are reduced to the lowest possibility.
John Denison retired in 1973. In 1998, in recognition of his remarkable achievements and his contribution to Canada's economy, he was awarded the prestigious Order of Canada, the highest award bestowed upon a civilian.
The Order of Canada is a great achievement, for anybody to attain in Canada, and for his involvement in the North and making mining viable and mines successful.
Denison passed the ice trucking legacy to Dick Robinson, a veteran trucker who learned the rules of ice road building with Denison. Dick Robinson built RTL Robinson Enterprises into the largest winter road trucking operation in the Northwest Territories. Today, Dick Robinson's son Marvin is the company's president and director of operations.
Actually, we're in our 4th generation of trucking. My grandfather was involved in trucking, my father, of course, and through all of the years that we've been here, we've been involved in the winter ice roads from the very first winter we were here.
Over the years, RTL has taken Denison's intuitively learned techniques and applied a calculated and systematic methodology to the science of ice road building. The road's path is planned during the summer. Road engineers use a combination of bush plane observation, lake geography, and the global positioning satellite technology. 6 months later, when the lakes are sufficiently frozen, the actual building of the road begins. Crews spend the month of January carving the roads according to the pre-designed plot. Two methods are used to measure the ice depth. Traditionally, the ice drill, or auger, is used to measure the ice thickness every several feet. New radar technology has replaced the auger, producing a more accurate graph of the ice thickness. The ice must be 40 inches thick to support a 50-ton truck. Next, a giant plow pushes back the insulating snow. Exposing the ice to the sub-zero air ensures that it stays frozen longer.
What we'll do is remove the snow back as far as we can. In some cases, our roads are 150 feet wide, and what that does is allow the cold frost to penetrate the ice.
Next on deck in the arsenal of road building equipment is the Argo. Its fat amphibious tires allow it to float should it crash through the ice. The Argo pulls a drag, a huge steel frame that fills the potholes with snow and evens out the surface. Vehicles rolling over the same road surface pack the snow solid and build an inch of new ice daily. Finally, a truck pumps fresh water from beneath the ice to fill in the cracks that constantly appear. With air temperatures well below zero, the water freezes on contact. Crews must be on the alert to any changes in the ice that slight temperature variations can make.
As the temperature changes, so does the ice. When it's minus 40 or 45, the ice is very, very rigid. And of course, as the temperature warms up, the ice becomes a lot more flexible. So for us, we find that our best ice conditions are really when it's around minus 20.
The magical allure of the North and a paycheck double that of regular trucking tempts drivers from all over the world to accept the unique and perilous challenges of the ice road. The very best truckers are not intimidated by the inevitable hazards. They return every winter to take on Mother Nature and test their extreme road skills.
The former Great Slave Lake Railway, now a branch of the Peace River Division, extends over 600 kilometers north from Grimshaw, Alberta to Hay River, and is the only railway in the Northwest Territory. Ice Road Truckers will return in a moment. You're watching Ice Road Truckers on Modern Marvels.
Driving the ice roads of Canada's Northwest Territories is like no other ride on Earth. Its unique challenges make it the pinnacle of all truck routes. To minimize the risks, to save lives, and to ensure a lifeline of goods heading north, RTL Robinson Enterprises put their drivers through a rigorous orientation and training program.
We make sure that they understand what we call the rules of the road, and we try and explain to them what happens as you're driving on the road and on the ice. And of course, we make sure they have a little bit of survival training, first aid training, so that in the event somebody does get hurt, they can look after each other.
As a safety measure, the company's dispatcher sends drivers on the ice roads with a partner in the event one of them might get into trouble. Each driver carries enough food, clothing, and emergency supplies to last a couple of days. While rookies get vital tips from veteran truckers, all agree that it's time behind the wheel that seals confidence.
It's a little bit like flying an airplane by the seat of your pants. You develop this feel for when equipment is doing its best job and are able to work that piece of equipment so that we maneuver our ways up and down the hills all of the time.
The rules of the road are in place to save lives and loads, because on this Arctic Avenue, the risks are huge.
The rules are there, follow them, and you'll be all right. They don't say you're out here to kill yourself, I don't think. Keep at the speed that they set is pretty well the speed that you should be doing. If you go any more than that, then you are looking for trouble.
These 18 and sometimes 30-wheel behemoths run up to 550 horsepower and can be a versatile 8-wheel drive. This allows for maximum flexibility over the unpredictable conditions.
It's respect for your conditions, for your road. It's respect for what you're driving. It's not a matter of just putting it in one gear like you do in a motor car, put it in drive and go. You just can't do that. You're given 18 speeds, then that's what they're there for. You pick the combination of speed, revs, the torque that you want. It's all down to the driver. Like, we could put it in top gear and go like hell, but we wouldn't go far.
Specially trained pit crews work round the clock to maintain every truck returning from and heading out to the wilderness. Each truck that comes in is specially equipped for the brutal weather. In addition to mounting special tires, fuel and brake lines are reinforced. and additional heaters and radios are installed. Once on the road, drivers brace themselves to find cracks and hear the ice crunch as they go over a frozen lake. It is a shocking experience for the uninitiated. The cracking is the sound of the ice flexing under the tremendous weight of the truck. As the ice flexes, it creates a pressure wave in the water underneath it. Speed limits of 15 miles per hour are strictly enforced to keep the pressure wave to a minimum. If the driver goes too fast, the wave gains terrific power.
What you have to be aware of is the obvious reaction of that wave when it hits the shore under the ice at the other end. Now, if you hit that lake too hard and set up a big wave, then it's going to blow out at the other end where you want to get off it. So you have to be aware every time that as you come down onto the ice, that you take it slowly on, and as you go off, that you go off very carefully as well, that you don't set up too big a reaction from further out and speed up, otherwise you're going to create a wave again and blow the track underneath you.
If a pressure wave busts through the ice, crews would have to route the ice road around the blowout and rebuild the portage, costing thousands of dollars in labor and lost freighting time. For these truckers, negotiating the portages is a perilous challenge.
But right now the roads these portages are getting real slippery because the sun is getting hot and it's pretty easy to spin out now.
The skill that really needs to be developed by the drivers is not just patience and respect for the ice, but the ability to know how to travel and operate your piece of machinery so that you can use the weight to help you up and down the hills, as well be able to control the throttle so that you can keep the feel of the most traction for the wheel as you climb these hills.
Right now we're going down onto Dome Lake. I'm just retarding the vehicle, keeping the revs up so that the retarder works efficiently and bring us down onto the ice at a slow speed so that we don't set up that wave that I was talking about that would react at the other end. Once we're onto the lake and the weight's distributed evenly, then we can pick up the speed to what we're running at. And we're running at about 25 kilometers an hour across the ice loaded.
Gavin's convoy is heading toward Lockhart Camp, one of the few Arctic roadside rest stops planted at the top of the world. At this oasis in the desert of ice, truckers can take a well-earned break, get a warm meal, and check on road conditions. Leslie Leishman has double duty here. She's a dispatcher, receiving weather updates and keeping track of each truck's location. And she's also the camp nurse.
You often see cases of frostbite, whether it be on their ears or their hands if they've been fixing some equipment, and a lot of it they cannot do with gloves on. So you do see cases of frostbite, and some through negligence and others through just something that they have to do in their line of duty to keep their truck rolling on the road.
On this day, there is a report of a vicious snowstorm just ahead.
It's blowing snow, it's blowing worse up north, so visibility is very poor. Because it's blowing so bad, they can't really see, and they use snowbanks only to guide themselves, so it's a very unsafe situation.
For rookie driver Sheldon Hillier, the camp is a chance to rest, eat, and prepare for the road ahead.
Safety first above all, and that's why we're sitting today, because it's a question of being able to see out on the ice, and if you get trapped out during a storm, then I mean that's not something you're into. So they would rather stop us here, park, and then they know everybody's here and okay.
For Sheldon, the camp is also a place to collect his thoughts and calm his shattered nerves. Only the day before, he took a wrong turn and it nearly cost him his life.
I slowed down and started to edge out on the ice, and I got out just the length of my truck and went through. It happened so fast and whatnot that reaction took over. I knew that I had to get the truck out of there before it froze.
Fortunately, Sheldon escaped, and his convoy partner helped drag his truck and his precious cargo out of the freezing drink. However, other drivers might not be so lucky. If a rig drops through the ice, salvage crews and Arctic divers must recover the machines and the men trapped underwater.
To help build ice roads, crews use GPS satellite technology, which encompasses 24 satellites operated by the U.S. Air Force and is monitored from 5 ground stations around the world. Modern Marvels will return in a moment. You're watching Ice Road Truckers on Modern Marvels.
In an average winter, RTL Robinson Enterprises dispatches over 400 trucks, carrying as many as 3,800 loads over the frozen lakes. The Arctic trucking industry ensures that enough goods are shipped in this short season to keep the mines of Canada's Northwest Territories sustained until the next winter. It is in this race to supply the remote communities that truckers meet their greatest challenge: to safely cross the giant frozen lakes and rivers. Last January, on the Mackenzie River, a driver lost focus and ignored the posted road signs.
As this driver approached this area that had a detour for the traffic that was able to cross on the ice, I believe he misunderstood the sign and thought that the detour meant all traffic detour. So he proceeded down this road and miscalculated what the wait sign had said and thought that he was quite fine being able to go across that ice crossing. So he had actually got about halfway across the river when the ice wasn't thick enough and the whole unit had fallen in.
His double trailer, called the Super B train, was carrying 10,000 gallons of diesel fuel, enough fuel to destroy the delicate eco-balance of the entire region. Luckily for the driver, fuel floats and physics, not foresight, kept his 50-ton big rig from dropping all the way to the bottom. He had enough time to leap to safety and call for help. In addition to trucking freight, RTL is charged with salvaging trucks when they crash through the ice. When the emergency call comes, they dispatch special vehicles equipped with massive load-bearing winches capable of pulling 100 tons of dead weight out of the icy depths.
So typically what we do is wait for the ice to stabilize around the unit. And what that means, it sometimes has to freeze in for 2-3 days, or in some cases a month. And then what we'll do is set up our devices so that we can lift the unit out.
Prior to lifting, the crew must free the trapped vehicle from the setting ice. They first drill around the truck and carefully plant dynamite to blast it out.
It's a bit of a risky process, but again, we try and calculate our risk and make sure that we use a lot of caution while we're doing this.
Once the tanker is securely harnessed to the salvage equipment, the crew lights the fuses and blasts the monster truck free. Slowly, inch by inch, the tanker is hauled out of the freezing water. It took Robinson and his team 1 week, working in savage minus 40-degree weather, to recover this Super B train and save its lethal cargo. RTL charged the fuel carrier an estimated $60,000 for the recovery. The rogue driver was fined thousands of dollars for his mistake.
Over the years, we've become very, very good at being able to salvage equipment. We've never had a unit that's gone all the way to the bottom that we've never recovered.
However, if a truck does break through and sink to the bottom, a special Arctic dive unit is called in.
A lot of the recovery work that we do is an instant kind of thing. It happens over the phone. A sergeant from a detachment will phone us and say, "Wayne, we have a problem here and we've got 2 people under the ice."
Typically, by the time Wayne Zowski and his Arctic dive team are deployed, the lake is again iced over where the vehicle fell through. They choose a drop zone, set up a work site, and then cut a hole big enough for the diver.
You learn how to really, work with impossible odds sometimes, but after a while it becomes very, very second to your nature, and that's part of the quote Arctic experience. If you allow frustrations to happen, or you allow Mother Nature to get the best of you, then that type of work can become very dangerous.
Thankfully, fatalities are rare. Fewer than a dozen drivers have perished on the lakes. The last fatality was more than 10 years ago. As this mighty convoy of tanks was crossing Great Slave Lake, the lead driver, or lead hen, found a fracture in the ice. This fracture is known as a pressure ridge. It occurs when there are sudden changes in the temperature. As ice freezes, it pushes together, creating bumps or ridges. Then, as it thaws, it pulls apart and opens up dangerous cracks, fissures in the ice. If drivers can't cross a pressure ridge, they will have to find a way around it.
You can see the water, and the crack is only about 8 inches wide, but it goes straight down, and the ice is probably 4 or 5 feet deep here. And I can only guess at the depth of the water, but it could be anywhere from 50 to 150 feet deep.
Like a plate of glass, one crack and a whole lake of ice can shatter.
the thicker the glass, the more weight it'll support, and the ice is very, very similar to that. So what we need to do is monitor how we're putting our roads in and make sure that as we operate, we're not running into any of the crack areas.
In a lesson gleaned from the pioneer ice truckers, RTL is prepared for any contingency. This time, a plow truck is deployed to forge a new road 50 yards to the east. However, on this new road, another ice fracture is found. This time, they deploy a portable steel bridge, specifically designed to allow these giant rigs to cross widening fissures. It's also quicker than plodding and plowing a new road. The drivers unchain the bridges and lay them over the crack. Then, each load is carefully and painstakingly guided over the narrow bridge. They cannot afford to make a mistake here. The drivers and their 5 tanks cross the 150-mile-long Great Slave Lake intact, safely reaching Yellowknife, just as John Dennison did in 1947. It's the unique thrill of ice road driving that draws this highly skilled team of truckers. Another reason drivers are lured here season after season is the spectacular, even magical environment they encounter, including the mythical Northern Lights.
You could almost sit there and touch it, but you can't, and it's changing all the time. I sat there probably for an hour listening to these Northern Lights and just watching them.
It's been a wonderful experience. It's just so much to learn about the way the water works and the principle of hydraulics under the ice and how you operate your vehicle over it, how you treat the ice. There's a whole book full of learning to go into a very short space of time.
These truckers follow the footsteps of the great explorers and are fused with the pioneer spirit of the first ice road truckers. They carry the vital knowledge of Arctic survival learned from the native peoples of the North. They push ever on to tear through tundra, break bush, and skate over frozen lakes to carve roads that melt away with the arrival of spring. Next year, when the brutal Arctic winter bears down and claims this magnificent and spellbinding land, the best drivers will return again to ride the most challenging roads on Earth.